Hey guys, we're back. This time we're taking a look at another Wave 5 release for the World of Tanks miniatures game. This time around it is the British Churchill VII. And I'm not a huge fan of these in the video game. We'll have to see how they do on the tabletop game. I actually own one from the previous one, but I've never played it because I don't really play British too much. So I will check this one out though and see how it holds up. But anyway, we're going to get in and take a look. As with the other ones here, if you see this little sticker on the front, it means that inside this pack is going to be a code that you can use in the online game to get yourself some free stuff, whether you have a new or an existing account. So if you're interested in the online game, definitely check that out. So as always, first we have our insert here, and on the back you have a image of the tank there, as well as a listing of everything that is inside this expansion. Inside this are the instructions on how to redeem that key code for the online game, and the code is on the other side of this little part down here. The first thing here, we have the vehicle card. It's our Churchill VII. It is a tier 6 heavy tank, 49 points. That's extremely low for a heavy. You have a firepower of 4, which is more on par with a medium tank usually. Survivability of 3, which is nice. Pretty good for a heavy tank. I think that's standard. Mobility of 1, extremely slow, but again, heavy tank. Initiative of 5, which is actually pretty nice. Down here we have our crew of 5, which is a commander, gunner, driver, radio operator, and a loader. And we have 6 hit points, which is on the lighter side, but still reasonable for, especially for the points cost of this. On the flip side here, we have no special rules for this tank. We do have our heavy ability up here. When defending, this tank can re-roll a blank on your defense dice. Always nice. And then down here we have a little bit of history about the tank. Churchill's always been an odd design. My biggest complaint about it is the center mounted turret. And I'll get to that more when we get the model out. But overall, it's not an amazing tank, but again, for the points cost and what you're getting, it's very reasonable, and I can definitely see where it would have its use. Onto our upgrade cards. Start off here with the Churchill IV turret. This is actually a -4 cost, so it's reducing the cost of the vehicle. British only, can only be used on the Churchill VII. It reduces your survivability, so you're going to drop from that 3 down to a 2. But you gain the fortress ability, which is when this tank is the target of a side shot, you do not subtract a defense die. So basically you're losing 1 defense die overall, but when you're flanked basically and shot from the side, you're no longer losing that additional die for that. So you're reducing your overall armor to basically reinforce the side armor slightly. It's an interesting trade-off. I'm not sure I would use it. Maybe. It depends on the build, because definitely it's already a cheap tank with a good survivability. Knocking it down to a 2 is not that bad. Next we have the 77mm gun. 4 points, British only, can only be used on the Churchill VII. Gives you +1 to your attack and -2 to your initiative. Basically, it takes longer to reload, I believe, is the trade-off there. It's also heavier, so it slows the tank down, slows down your shooting, but you're gaining a little bit more firepower out of it. Is it worth it? 4 points, bumps you up to a 5 attack. I don't know, because it's dropping you down to a 3 initiative. If you have some way to boost that initiative back up, maybe it's a decent trade-off. That's a real hard one. I'd have to think about that, definitely, and look at the rest of the build to decide if it's something I want to use. And next we have Pudding and Tea, which is a consumable upgrade, 1 point, British only, discarded on use, and you can use it to repair radio damage or bailed out crew critical. I say this each time we get one of these. I understand the, it's basically boosting morale, fixes the bailed out card, your guys get scared, they jump out of the tank. It cancels that because it's boosting morale. I'm not sure how you use Pudding and Tea to fix the radio, though. So I understand the concept behind it. I just found it funny the way they worded those. There's one of those for each of the factions. I think Americans have chocolate or soda. Americans have soda. The Germans have chocolate. And yeah, it's just weird. And then finally we move on to our crew upgrades. First one you have here is a basic driver for 3 points. It gives you +2 initiative during the movement phase. This is another way to boost that initiative back up, especially if you take the bigger gun, you lose it down. Keep in mind that's only boosted on the movement phase though, not the shooting phase. So you need to play around with that. I think there's other upgrades that can be used to compensate for it. And then finally we have Peter Kingston here. He's a commander, 9 points, British only. He has Mentor, which gives you +2 initiative during the movement phase for every 2 crew cards attached to this tank. Commander counts as 1, so if you have an additional crew on the tank, you're getting +2. If you get 2 more crew on the tank, you're getting +4. So that could be useful if you're doing a crew heavy build, if you're building around it and using it. Otherwise, not so much. You need at least 1 additional crewman on top of him to even make it do anything. Then we have Eagle Eye. When shooting, this tank can roll 1 less attack die. Then you can modify a hit into a crit. That one's pretty nice. The main gun only has 4 to start with, so you'll only be rolling 3 attack dice. So that's a trade-off. Maybe if you have the gun upgrade on here, you're rolling 5 dice, you drop down to 4. You really have to play around with some builds to make it useful. Definitely might be useful on a different tank though, I think. So again, that's a perfect kind of a situational one, and it really depends on how your build is and what you're going for overall. And last, we have our model here. Decent amount of detail on there. Doesn't look like they messed anything up on this one. I do like when they assemble them better than I could have, because I think I did put one of these together. Might have been a different variant, but your turret rotates. Does come off a little stiff. Again, I think a lot of that is due to this primer spray that they put on, because they do these separate and then they put them together. So there's paint on this peg, so it's kind of a tight fit, but it'll wear out over time. It still rotates nice, which is fine. And the gun's actually straight, so no complaints there. My big complaint, though, about the Churchill in general, though, is because of the turret placement. Most tanks you'll see have the turret mounted towards the front, maybe a little bit back, or towards the back, depending. I think the Germans like to do the back mounted, but generally the turret's mounted towards the front. So this way, when you peek around a corner, you could rotate the gun, fire the gun. For some reason, the Churchill has it mounted in the center. And the problem with this is, if you have a building here and you go to shoot, you have to pull half of the tank out of cover to turn the turret to shoot. Now this whole half of the tank is exposed and able to be shot at in order for you to just take a shot. And I think the longer wheelbase, the actual hull design was built for World War I trench warfare. So they had the trenches in the battlefield and this could drive across them. I think that was the original intention, and then they repurposed it for World War II. But as a design overall, though, I just always disliked that about the Churchills. And I even had a Black Prince, I think, in the online game. They all suffered the same issue, but depending on the equipment and armament you have on there, they can be a good tank. It's just, you got to work around that glaring flaw in them and find a way, find cover that comes just up to the track so you can get around it without exposing your whole side to someone. Keep that in mind when you're using them. That is going to come into play even in the tabletop game, because again, when you rotate this turret, this much of the tank has to be exposed before that turret can shoot. And if they have a clear line of sight on that side armor, you're going to have a bad day. So keep that in mind. Again, I haven't actually used the Churchills in the tabletop game. I own the old one. I own this one now. And I just don't play British very much. And going to try to get a game in with it just to see its strength and weaknesses. But right now I can just give you my thoughts based on the stats. It's a heavy with medium points cost. So you're getting slightly more hull. You're getting slightly more survivability. Average firepower. Again, you can swap some of that stuff up. The bigger gun on there. You can swap out you lose the 1 survivability to gain the fortress. I think these two are really interesting, and you can put the 2 of them on for 0 points, because this one's -4, this one's +4, so they cancel each other out. With those on there, I think it becomes more threatening tank, survivability of 2, firepower of 5. You still have that 6 hit points, and you're gaining that fortress ability. So, again, you're killing your initiative. Initiative 3 still isn't terrible. I've seen worse, but it is below average, so keep that in mind. If you have another vehicle in your army, I think the British have the Valentine, which is a light tank. You can use that as a scout vehicle, put a radio operator on there who will allow one of your other tanks to use his initiative, and that kind of balances out. So there's ways around it to build a platoon around having things like that, having those detriments that will balance out. It's just something you have to keep in mind when you're building and setting up your platoon. Overall, though, it's a solid. I don't know if I want to even call it a heavy because of the stats and because of what it is. It feels more like a medium. The points value, the attack value, and that makes it feel like a medium. The defense and the hit points make it feel like a heavy. So it's that balance in between. But it's definitely a solid tank stat-wise. Again, you'll have to see how it plays in the game. And that center-mounted turret is going to be your detriment that you definitely have to keep in mind when you're playing it. That's my thoughts on the Churchill. Again, I have not played them, so take that with a grain of salt. Your mileage may vary, and your play style may be way different than mine too, and it might not even be an issue for you. So that's just my thoughts on it. That's going to wrap it up for our look at the World of Tanks miniatures game Wave 5, the Churchill VII expansion. As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.